And welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole. This is the sister podcast, the Dark Academia Queen True Crime Lounge. Just a breezy chat and sassy Sun Bell. If you're new here, please hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications. Also, please subscribe, help a girl out. Also, if I reach 100 subscribers, I will be doing a giveaway from my merch shop. So please stay in tune. So also go check out my Instagram page. It is breezyville underscore YT channel. All right, with that being said, why don't we dive in? So, we know what blood money is, right? Do we know what Sadie Baker is? Well, do we know what Concord Cemetery is? Well, there is a rumor that there is a legend that says if you leave a couple of dollars on the grave of Sadie Baker, you may just appease the witch. Concord Cemetery is the final resting place for a baker who was buried alive by her community in the 19th century for, can we guess it, witchcraft. Now, you don't want to go walking in the graveyard at night because of the locals swear they can see her wandering amongst the tombstones. Now, in the sixth civil district near a modern day Manchester, Tennessee, lived the Sheltons, who were a largely prominent, well to do, and blessed family with multiple healthy children. Their daughter was also well known in the area for their beauty, and the sons were handsome and strong. And how although there have been many prospects taken advantage marriages until one day when a beautiful stranger comes to town, the legend focuses on a young Shelton daughter. And all the Shelton daughters were sought after by this man and prosperous suitors, but none was so prized other than Olivia. So, she was the most beautiful maiden in the town with a flawless olive skin and raven colored locks and crystal blue eyes. Young men far and wide vied for her affection, and she was the toast of a local gentry. Her parents used to use that to their social advantage, especially, can we guess, her mom. Why is it always the parents? Like, seriously. Take advantage of your kid's beauty, why not, right? That's why we have beauty pageants. But one afternoon, after a day in town, Olivia encountered a sad-looking beggar girl who had dusty streets in Manchester shopping district. Olivia had never seen this girl in town before and asked other passers about her, yet no one could say who she was or where she came from. And the poor thing was a pitiful sight, draped in threadbare rags until a dirty cloak, and smelled very disgusting, causing the town folk to ignore her, or at least avoid walking near her. But not this kind and curious Olivia. Now she was approached, kneeled to a stranger and asked her name. The girl would not reply or even look up. She only extended a dirt round cake, gesturing a coin to anyone else who values Olivia might be willing to part with. Olivia asked her name again, and if she needed help, but the beggar remained silent, only staring down at her hand. And Olivia asked a final time, but as much as she tried, there was no response to her boundless sympathy and pity for the town Trouton, and now a strange curiosity about her identity. Olivia pulled out her hand. And said, "That settles it." She said, "You're coming home with me and my family, and we're going to help you." And off they went toward the Shelton house at the edge of town. So, when Olivia would arrive home with the young girl in tow, her sisters are giddy with how they done a makeover project, but her mom was not so enthusiastic about Olivia's new friend. Nevertheless, all the girls begged to let her stay. But Mrs. Shelton finally relented, and Olivia and her sisters went straight toward cleaning her up. As the grime was slowly wiped away, they said that they were all taken aback by the incredible beauty underneath it all. And the girl had flowing golden white locks, flawless pale skin, a beautiful green eyes, and her slight frame fit into Olivia's best dress too easily. It is said that the sisters became insanely jealous of the new diamond in the rough, but no one as much as Olivia's mom. Now, Mrs. Shelton saw the silent street rat beauty as a threat to her daughter's place as the most beautiful girl in Manchester, and that simply would not do. So, Her fears were proven true later. The end that day when Mrs. Shelton um, son has a ride home from a hard day's work, and at dinner they barely spoke or ate at the gobsmacked Shelton boys were enthralled by the stunning, beautiful young girl. Now, she had probably not eaten in some time, and ferociously yet gracefully ate her fill, without her ever speaking a word. In the following days, Olivia's brothers, also said to have fought with what with others for the stranger's attention. Though she paid them or nor anyone else mind, the quiet girls just kept to herself and never spoke. Her lack of enthusiasm toward the boys didn't stop them from bragging around town about the stunning new resident at the Sheldon's house. So, as word was spread that through the small town of her presence, the usual gentlemen callers normally came to see Olivia, her sisters, and lost interest in them. Instead, they were all clamoring for a glimpse of the stranger behind the door. Olivia was not jealous of the girl like her sisters were. In fact, they made an effort to be the girl's friend, even though she never got any response for her efforts. However, all unnatural devotion for the Shelton boys and other male townsfolk were lost in the keen eyes of Olivia's mom. The mysterious girl became the talk of the town, and that left Mrs. Shelton's facing with the Southern societal conundrum. Now, she could not kick the girl on the street as fear of being a less than gracious hostess, and surely someone else in town would scoop up the young maiden for her for their benefit. Now, this would be creating even more of a pseudo rivalry with the Shelton girls. Now, her only option was to forcefully keep the girl as a captive house guest, and Mrs. Shelton would lock her away in a room as long as it took until marriage proposals for Olivia and her sisters were negotiated. She forbade all the Shelton men from speaking to anyone about her presence anymore, and she then sat the girl in the parlor, explained to her that she was not safe outside and that great harm would befall upon her if she left the house. So, the girls did not protest her imprisonment, but she just stared at the floor and never uttered a word. Olivia's world came crashing down one spring afternoon when the most eligible gentleman caller, a young, handsome man from another prominent family and Olivia's sweetheart, called on the blonde house guest for a troll in town, and their visit sent Mrs. Shelton into a rage. And crying with a broken heart, Olivia pleaded with her mom to throw the girl back into the street, or at least send her away to another town. She could not be consoled about the loss of her sweetheart, locking herself in a room and crying herself to sleep. So, when her mom decided to act, she decided to call the local minister. Instead, the only explanation was for the strange behavior was that a Naomi girl must be a witch, and she must be a common beggar girl who would not speak a word and hardly left the house that catch the attention of every man in town. The minister needed a little convincing since he too had to witness the congressional infatuation with the girl in her arrival. Now, he went word to convene to the town council. Miss Shelton demanded the council pass judgment on the girl's presence and asked the council were all men, they too could be bewitched by her devilry. Now, the minister agreed, and the council convened for judgment without allowing the girl any representation or any chance to defend herself. And the trial commenced, and the fiery speech of the minister and the scandalous accusations by Mrs. Shelton whipped through the town into a moral frenzy. And, and that was all they needed. Within moments, a verdict was passed. This is what they then declared her a witch, without any further evidence, and immediately debated how to proceed without ridding the town of the spell, ridding the town from her spell. And after much debate, the option of a traditional punishment for witchcraft, such as hanging, drowning, or burning at the stake, a vote was taken to be buried alive. covered with large rocks, and she could not escape the grave. A mob was dispatched in the Shelton house to retrieve her, and the rest were sent to the cemetery. The silent girl was dragged from her bed into the middle of the night by a golden hair, and she was stripped, bound to a pole, and roughly dragged through the dirt streets where Olivia originally found her. Now the town folks spit on her and cursed her as she shoved mercilessly in the fresh hole of the earth, where they would bury her, yet through the horrible shame and torment she did not resist, and still said nothing. Olivia suddenly had a change of heart, feeling responsible for the cruelty after seeing the rage of the neighbors. Oh, the poor girl, whose crime was being prettier than her, and she ran into the parade to stop the procession, placing herself between the nicks and the punches and pleading with them to stop. But she was unsuccessful. When the mob arrived to the cemetery, they stood the girl up on the edge of the hole and looked around the angry torch-lit face, who were once smitten with her and cursed her and despised her. She suddenly locked eyes with a distraught Olivia, her bleeding and swelling flew into a rage, and she shouted the only words she could ever speak. And these were, I am Sadie Baker. They pushed her in, took turns throwing down the rocks, burying her helplessly, and the young girl, under a spell mountain of stones, and several months passed, and a life returned to normal that the Sheltons were accustomed to. All the sons and daughters were now married, off to start families of their own, and last to marry was the young girl Olivia, who ended up marrying that sweetheart that she so adored. And at first there was bliss in the house. Olivia's husband worked hard and provided a wonderful life, and they talked about regularly of grand plans and having children. And this all seemed right for a while until one night, while preparing for bed, Olivia's husband found her sitting, absently staring at her reflection in the dressing. Her raven locks were clutched tightly and clenched in her fist. When he asked her if she was all right, she screamed and accused him of wanting a family with Sadie instead of her, and that she didn't cry to go to sleep. The strange paranoia continued for several days as she cursed for her long, dark, and olive skin, hating how she looked. She told him she wished she looked like Sadie so he would love her again. He assured her that he loved her now, but her fury would not let him hear her. So, Olivia would not eat or sleep, and she sat and stared blankly in the mirror, pulled at her hair, and begged the town doctor for help. But no balm, no tincture to calm Olivia's mind. He then went to the minister, who declared Sadie's final words at the grave had bewitched Olivia, and that it must be Sadie's spirit trying to take over her body, and he was desperately wanting to ease his wife's pain and out of desperation, so he allowed the minister to treat her. There was a violent exorcism performed, and among other religious rituals that would expel the tormented spirit, but nothing worked, and her condition were worsened by day. So, evening, Olivia's husband arrived home from and found her in front of the mirror again with a wide-eyed and wide stare. Her head was a mess and chopped off and jagged shut, and small bleedings from the garden shears, and that she would use to cut off all her hair. Now her long raven-colored hair in clumps, and that Olivia would say was that the ugly dark hair did not belong to the beautiful blonde. And she repeatedly asked him if he liked it. When he tried to calm her, she attacked him, throwing him on the floor, pouncing him to stop, and she screamed to his face, I am Sadie Baker, and then sprinted out of the house to the darkened woods, never to be seen again. Now, around the cemetery where Sadie was buried, reports persisted for many years of a woman's maniacal laughter and blood-curdling screams through the woods. They believed that it must have been either Olivia, suffering of the guilt of causing Sadie to be buried alive, or it was the spirit of Sadie Baker herself, returning to find her body under the stones. Now, it was said until Sadie found her body that she was cursed those who came to her grave and not left a coin, just as Olivia should have done when they met in the dusty streets. Now, is this true or not? Here is the question. Well, there is not really any corroborated stories that can regulate this word of mouth. You gotta remember, this was in the 1918, just over 100 years ago, and ironically, it also happened in Salem, Massachusetts. This is a possibility that has an incident like this could have occurred in Tennessee, as many were falsely persecuted as witches in many places throughout world history. So, as for the legend itself, there is little known about the life of the real Sadie Baker, but this grave and the story is that it's attached has stirred up so many minds to think that the grave belongs to the beautiful witch that was buried alive, which it definitely does not. And the evidence that was found was the real Sarah Wallen Baker in the grave that she was born in Georgia around 1804 and was the widow of Samuel Baker, who was killed in 1838 during the Seminole War in Florida. That was led by Andrew Jackson. I just really hate Andrew Jackson. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for that. But anyway, by 1860 census, Sarah, at the age of 57, lived in the 6th Civil District of Coffee County near Manchester, along with 8 various other bakers, as well as a young 1-year-old, likely a grandchild. And on the same census, there are several records of the Shelton family and their children living in the same district, but they cannot find in Olivia. So, the exact date isn't certain. It seems like she died in or about 1865, right after the end of the American Civil War. And based on the property records, she is the only Sarah Baker in Coffee County at the time. And since Sadie is a derivative of the nickname for Sarah, this is most likely the Sarah Baker that passed in 1865 at 61-ish years old, and not a young girl to be a witch and buried alive. So, the Sadie Baker story is well known around the world, and no new ground was broken into the investigation. However, even though it appears that this legend is easily debunked, an air of mystery still surrounds the gravesite. Many modern-day visitors have reported unsettling findings of the dread and fear that even just a brief time at the cemetery of being watched, particularly at Sadie's grave. Believers who have make a pilgrimage to Sadie's final resting place still get a coin atop her stone. Homage to the first encounter with Olivia begging for spare change, and hope the coin would placate Sadie's restless spirit. So, but that is it for this episode. Join me next time as we talk about the Denver State Mental Hospital, the Tenny's Gray Court Castle, and Liberty and Independence, New Jersey, aka the armpit of America. Alright, I'll see y'all next time.